Hey, what's happening? Jason Woodland back again with Always the Journey TV. Today we are representing number 62. So very excited about that. We've got all kinds of fun stuff happening. And I'm extremely excited about talking to you about my guest here in just a few moments. But right before that, just wanted to touch base on why does Always the Journey TV even exist? As I've specified before, this used to be a traditional podcast back in 2017 and 18 and even into 19. And we pivoted in 2020 so we could put a face to the names of the businesses, the art, the event spaces and side hustles and all this stuff in between. But anyway, thank you very much for joining us. I sincerely appreciate it. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel and throw us a thumbs up if you enjoy the content. And if you have any questions on any of these interviews, please throw a question down in the comments and we'll definitely jump on that and answer it for you. Today, I am extremely excited about introducing to you my friend Rob McNealy. He is a serial entrepreneur. He is also the owner of Flooristics, a forensic consulting company, and he is also co-founder of TUSC, the Universal Settlement Coin, a crypto payment and NFT project that we're going to be getting into a little bit further down the line here. He is also a no-compromise supporter of the right to self-defense, as well as an evangelist for small business, cryptocurrency, and blockchain technology. So we're going to be talking about all kinds of fun stuff today. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce my friend Rob McNealy. What's happening?
Hey, Jason, how are you?
Unbelievable. It's a beautiful day.
Well, that was a very nice introduction. I appreciate it. And listening to an introduction about myself just makes me seem like, man, if I wasn't me, I would think I'm just an ADH flake. Listening to all that crap, it's like, well, you guys, you're just all over the board. How can you not focus? And so that's what it sounds like. But it seems like I still am focusing, but it's just kind of, I'm diverse. I do a lot of different things.
Well, and that's what cereal means, right? I didn't think it meant you sat down with Mikey and ate life cereal.
It's more like I'm more like an oatmeal entrepreneur because it's very lumpy along the way and sticky and it's a mess. I think that's more like what it really is. Look like, you've seen those kind of like memes where it's like what my friends think an entrepreneur does, and it just says like beginning rich, and then they say what it really is, and it's like this scribble and all this kind of crazy in the middle to get to the journey or through the journey. And I think that's probably more accurate
Yes.
because you never know. I think if you look at it, a lot of people there's a big difference between entrepreneurs and employees on how they view these things. Employees are very linear in their thinking because that's what they're trained to do. They're trained to do one thing and they progress along that path. But I think that for entrepreneurs to be successful, they have to be flexible and changeable and adaptable and willing to pivot when circumstances or markets or opportunities present themselves. And because of that, it sometimes looked like you're all over the board when you're actually just taking a different path that actually it makes more sense. So anyways,
Yeah.
I can get crazy on all that different stuff.
I'm with you. And that's why our conversations can last so long. We joked right before the recording that we could easily turn this into a 7 or 8 hour podcast. Don't worry, it's not going to be that long, but it's going to be power packed with all kinds of information for sure. So first of all, Rob, I wanted to learn a little bit more about your history. So what state or states did you grow up in? And let's just start there.
Sure. So I was born and raised in the Detroit area in Michigan. And so my wife mostly was raised in Michigan, but so I spent most of my life in Michigan up through undergrad. And then after my wife and I got married almost 22 years ago now, we moved out west to Utah for the first time. Lived in Utah for a year, moved to Colorado for 12 years, the Denver area. So my wife could go to medical school, and then I went to graduate school in Colorado. And then we moved up to Wyoming for a while, kind of took a break. Literally, we sold a little business and took a break and lived in a small town in Wyoming because I wanted to be a firefighter. And then we moved back to Utah now. I live in the Salt Lake City area, and I've been here, I don't know, I think we're going on 8 years.
Okay, great. So your wife has got an MD, right?
Yep.
And then you've got an MBA.
Correct.
So you guys are a very, very well-educated family, that's for sure.
We do value education. Absolutely. That's important to us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just as a sort of a quick take. Well, that's not a quick take. Well, let's circle back to that because that's going to be a little bit more of a take.
Yeah, we can dive into education philosophy too, but that'll take a while. But yeah, I'd like to say one point. I believe in education, but I don't necessarily think you have to have a college degree for it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I'm definitely grateful for my college experience and my bachelor's degrees. But I'm not. It's funny because I've ebbed and flowed on the extremely pro college to the you don't need it at all type mentality. I don't think there's an easy answer on either way. I think that there's a lot of value just as long as you're choosing the proper path for education. If it can either A, it can translate directly into the economy and you can turn it into something where you're able to get paid. Or secondly, if it's something that you're truly passionate about and you want to learn, I think that's important as well, just as long as there's a means to pay for it and not sort of lock yourself into multi-decades of years paying back student loans.
Student loans are financial herpes.
Well, I guess that's one way to put it. Oh, my gosh. So also, I wanted to touch on this because I think this is an interesting piece. At one point, you were in the very top most followed people on Twitter. You were an early adopter to Twitter. Can you tell us just a little bit about that path and experience?
Well, like the episode number here, 62, congratulations on that. I was an early adopter of Twitter, and by follower count, back when I thought it mattered, I was number 62 in the world by followers. And it was an interesting place because there was still a lot of people on there. I mean, there's tens of millions of people on Twitter even back then. But what changed is that Twitter implemented a recommendation engine when you set up a new account. They didn't have that in the beginning. And so what happened is, and Twitter was smart about this, is that they took the celebrities. This is how the early celebrities blew up on Twitter, is that Twitter took the early celebrities to get them really involved, let's just say the early influencers, and they put those influencers into their recommendation engine. So when people set up new accounts, they automatically were recommended to follow these particular celebrities. And then that's when I got wiped out. Or not wiped out, but that's when I got knocked out of that top 60, top 100, top 200. That's when I became just completely social media irrelevant, and that's where I am today.
I wouldn't call you social media relevant by any means. I mean, you're still deep in the 300,000 range in followers, and that's definitely something that's commendable in terms of building a not only a presence but a community in that Twitter sphere, so to speak.
And so how I did that, and it was actually deliberate, but when I used to have a small business radio show on terrestrial radio stations in Denver, in the Colorado market. And I was taking all those shows every day. It was a weekend show called Startup Story. And I would take the podcast up, the radio show, and I would literally take a jump drive to the state radio station. And the engineers like, "What are you doing?" I go, I want the recording. And they were annoyed by it, but I always took the recording. And then I would go home and I would put that on my website and put it on iTunes. And I was one of the first people to take a terrestrial radio show and turn it into a podcast. And because of that, not only did at the time, my domain name, page rank went up really high, but I started building followers because then I was building an audience. At one time, my podcast alone on iTunes was getting about 50,000 downloads a month. Back in the day, and that was a long time ago. And I'm not currently doing any podcast anymore. Just kind of taking another break. I do love podcasting though, but that's kind of how it built. So that was the thing that kind of blew up my Twitter profile and the radio station and stuff like that.
Wow! And also, from what I remember you telling me quite a while back, is you actually wrote a book about building a Twitter following at some point?
I did. I had a little ebook called Twitter for Influence, and I just kind of wrote it was really about profile optimization, essentially. So what I been back and then, and you can't even, most of those things don't even work anymore, but some of the things would be like, if you want to build a following, find someone like you that you're similar interests, and then follow their followers, because if they're following this other person for let's just say you're into small business, so you follow the followers of a small business guru if you're trying to be a small business guru too, and then typically you'll get a better follow back rate and things like that. So it was about profile optimization, using keywords, I still believe this is important. Put your profile picture in on your profile. Don't put an avatar. I mean, obviously NFTs are a thing, but you don't put like don't use the default image. Put your own. I think people respond to a picture of a real person. Hopefully it's you. but I think there's just basic stuff like back then. But that's what we used to talk about, because back when social media, I'm talking 2008, social media, Facebook, Twitter, they're all brand new. People are just trying to figure out best practices, and I was involved in that. Kind of trying to figure out what the edges are and how to make these platforms work.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's interesting because out of all the social media platforms, and of course there's always like the newest thing, and everybody sort of gets excited for a few minutes, and then it sort of fizzles out and so on. Twitter is actually still my favorite platform. And I mean, if you're following the right people on Twitter, you can get an astronomical amount of education in short tidbits or to read threads. I mean, it's amazing how much I've learned throughout the years on Twitter.
I think Twitter has been pretty good for networking. I think the latest app, and I can tell you from a networking standpoint, Clubhouse has been the best in-person networking event or platform that I've seen of late. I've made more real-world connections talking to people on the phone and really connecting with people outside the application on Clubhouse. And so I've been, I just started really getting into that. I think I have like 1,000 followers on Clubhouse now, or around there. And I'm finding that Clubhouse is good for networking. But you know what? Because I think what's happening is you can, obviously video is, the best, communication channel, right? Because you can see body language. You can hear, not only do you get the audio, because you can hear inflections in your voice and tone. So there's video is a much richer communication channel, and Clubhouse doesn't have the video, but still audio is still better than text, because you're still getting, you can tell a lot about a person from the tone they use when saying words, whereas when you type, you don't have that context. And so I find that you get a lot of really interesting rooms where you can have a lot of great points, and then people immediately back channel you on the channel or on the app. And then you can go through and connect with those people. And I've literally met a lot of really good people on Clubhouse based on topics. So I think that's actually a very interesting platform. I don't know if there's such a thing, or if it would be possible to do like a video chat version of that. I think it would be a very interesting app if someone who had the resources could really launch something like that. I think it'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah. That is definitely very interesting. So to connect back a little bit to your history, being a serial entrepreneur, can you tell us sort of briefly the path that led up to Flooristics, and then we'll talk about what Flooristics is. But what are some of the previous businesses that you've owned or ran or were a part of leading up to that point? And if you can sort of give us a timeline as well, sort of like what year was what as well, that'll be great.
Wow, that's I had a lot of failed businesses, or I would almost say failed side hustles prior to getting into Flooristics. So I got into the flooring world kind of by accident, wasn't the intention. So I was living in Denver. This would have been 2000. My last corporate job I left when I was 2004, and I was selling spy planes. I was working in the aviation industry. And I took and had this weird idea to start a night vision company for yachts. So I saw this thing on the Discovery Channel about barges and boats that were going down the Mississippi, and then in storms they would go down and have boating accidents. And I'm like, hey, I saw this cool night vision technology thing at my work, which was brand new, thermal imaging technology. There was this little something to do with one of my projects. One of our vendors had this cool thermal imaging technology we were implementing into our aircraft for takeoff and landings in inclement weather. And I'm like, that would totally be cool on boats. I didn't know anything about boats. I didn't know anything about marine electronics, and I had really no money to do this. So this was my first big startup. Now, I had side hustle startups before. I had a little web development consulting side gig and a bunch of other stuff, but I always had a full-time job. And then I was still working corporate and hated the corporate job. I just finished my MBA, and then I went to that vendor and I licensed the technology of this thermal imaging system, hired a CAD student for $15 an hour, and we sat at Denny's designing a new bracket system to mount this thermal imaging camera. And I got another company to sell me a pan and tilt mount. And then I got a painting and coatings company to come up with waterproof coatings for the whole system. And I pulled it together, just totally bootstrapped, and then started going to the Miami Boat Show and some of these other things. Got my other buddy in California to help me make a brochure. And I started selling an $80,000 night vision system for yachts. Totally failed. And I learned so much about business from this business. So toward the end of the business, actually, after I spent all this borrowed money on credit cards, I literally took a home equity loan. I did everything wrong. But at the end, I put together a board of advisors almost toward the end of the failure of the business. And some of them were really, and there's a whole process for building a personal board of advisors for a startup. And I have this is where this worked for me, but it didn't work for me. At the time, I got a couple of big yacht guys, like yacht designers, and they were on my board, and the system was $80,000. I literally networked. I was talking to the Minister of Defense for the country of Ireland about going and demoing it for their river boats and stuff like that. And they pulled out at the end. And then one of my new board of advisor members, hey, you got this $80,000 system. Do you have a $40,000 system? I go, no, why? He goes, I could sell 2 of those right now for you. And I didn't have the money to build a $40,000 system. I didn't have the engineering and all that stuff to do it. And so it was really interesting. And I'm like, get those board of advisors on first at the beginning, not toward the end. That would help you a lot, guide you on what to build. But then what ended up happening is my buddy, this is a start of the big housing bubble back in the early 2000s, right? And so my buddy had a flooring company in Michigan. And I had business, I worked with him on handyman businesses and stuff prior. And he was like, hey, come on out here and help me do some sales. You're pretty good at that. You're good with customers. And so I would go out for them and go out to Michigan and stay with him. And I'd go help him do sales calls and stuff for a couple of weeks. He'd pay me a commission. I'd get him like 30, 40 grand worth of work. And then he would pay me a commission. I'd go back home and work on my startup. And that's how I was funding my startup. But that night vision company was the first one where I was just actually only trying to work on a startup. I didn't even have a side hustle other than selling flooring. And my buddy said, I love coming out and visiting you in Denver. Why don't you start a flooring company in Michigan? I'm like, I got an MBA now. I'm too good for this manual labor stuff. He's like, give it a shot. If you go try to get some jobs out there. And if you get some, I'll come visit you and I'll do the jobs for you. So my wife's like, yeah, it'd be nice if you pay some bills. So why don't you try it? So I literally put an ad on Craigslist. I bought a clipboard and a tape measure. And this is how I got into the flooring world. I put out some ads and literally got flooring jobs in Denver for this new business idea that I had. And then I called my buddy, hey, dude, I got some jobs for you to do. He's like, I'm too busy to come out to do it. I can't help you. So what I ended up doing is finding subcontractors. And my first year as a flooring contractor in Denver, we did about $600,000 in revenue. The next year, we did more than $1 million. And then that next year, my wife's like, I go, honey, I know I've spent all this money on this night vision company and it's just not working out. I can't get the sales. She's like, shut it down. You're making money with this flooring thing. And you go, and I actually felt stupid at the time because I was trying to be a white collar corporate guy. I had this MBA. I spent all this money on my master's degree and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I thought I had this ego problem and it was my problem that somehow being in the blue collar world was a failure. God, I was so stupid. I was just an immature kid at the time, basically. But I had this view, and I didn't want to go to the corporal because I came from a poor background, and I wanted to be something white collar and successful because at that point in my brain, that was what I equated success was. But I got over that pretty quickly. And so I did, the flooring world, that was really cranking at that time. That was before the last housing crash. And then I got cross-trained as a floor inspector, and because I wanted to know more about the technical side, the science side, the wood science stuff. And then the housing market crashed, and we eked by for a couple years with the contracting side of the business, but it was just going down, 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 down. In that middle of that, my wife and I, as a last-ditch effort, we bought a distressed liquor store in the hood, in the worst neighborhood in Denver. Basically remodeled the building, reopened it, built the business back up, and then flipped that in 12 months. Now, I'm still in the flooring business, too. So that was like the nighttime side hustle. So that we did a startup buying a distressed turnaround. while I'm still doing the flooring business, which is tanking because of the housing market. But then I started doing more floor inspections, which, and I got good at that. And then we sold that floor. So we basically, this is 2012. So summer 2012, we sold the liquor store at a profit. We did a 4X on that from what we put into it in 12 months. We took that money, my flooring company, the construction side of it, was tanked at that point. So I actually just turned over my book of business to one of the guys that was working for me at the time. And then we moved up to Wyoming and took a break. Had a little bit of a cushion, little runway. We had 4 years. We had about 3.5 years because during that the housing crash really started in like 2007, even though most people say it started in 2008. It started in 2007. So we had about 4.5 years of like a lot of personal struggle. My wife wasn't working at the time. And then we moved up to Wyoming for 1.5 years, and I became a volunteer firefighter and a volunteer EMT, and I started growing what turned into Flooristics. I really went full-time into being a floor inspector, and then I got cross-trained into floor safety, and I became a walkway auditor, and I also started getting into expert witness work at that time. So I took the knowledge that I had around not only the construction side of installation of floors and maintenance of floors, but then when I became an inspector, I got a lot more of the technical side, like wood science. There's a lot of pieces to it. So flooring, there's a lot of material science and things of that nature. And then I took all the knowledge that I had around all those things, and I just basically started monetizing it into consulting practice, which became Flooristics. I did it under a couple brands, but I've been doing it since 2014 under the Flooristics brand. And I've just constantly gotten a lot of training since that period of time. And but the good thing about that business is that there's not a lot of people that do it. It's so niche, no one even knows it exists. There's about 500 people in the country that do it full time. Yeah. And the great thing is it's never going to make me rich, but it's an excellent part-time job. Like I make a really good full-time living from working a couple days a week, but that gives me complete freedom of my schedule. But it also gives me the ability to work on other side projects while bringing in a good income. And so that's one of the problems with a lot of startups, right? It's like you got to work full time, but you don't have a way to make money to support yourself or your family while you're trying to do it. I've built into, this practice that I have that I make really good money. I'm respected. I work all over the country in my field. Both on the expert witness side and the consulting side. And so I can do this 2-3 days a week, make good enough money, and then I can work on the other stuff that I got into, which is cryptocurrency. And I spend a lot of the rest of my time doing that. Nice.
Okay. So before we pivot over to the conversation on that project, you're still doing Flooristics, which is cool.
Yep.
Did you handle all types of flooring? Was it wood flooring, laminate, carpet? I mean, what did that look like? Just real
yes.
quick.
So, and I also went to welding school in the middle of all that too. So I'm a welder too. That's a different thing. So in the flooring world, which no one knows that exists, but now I know this exists not only in the flooring world, but a lot of industries have this kind of tract. So, and this is why I've pivoted a lot of my beliefs about education, because this is part of that. So in the flooring world, there's an inspector tract for every type of floor covering. That's different. So if you want to be, and I am certified for all floor coverings as an inspector now. So I've gone through an extensive amount of training over the last 10 years, primarily. So if you want to be a carpet inspector, the process is you first have to be a certified carpet cleaner. You have to be trained and certified as a carpet cleaner. Then you have to go and get certified as a carpet repair technician. And then you got to go through inspector school. And then you got to go do a bunch of reports under like a mentor who evaluates your report writing. And then you take and apply, and then you get your industry certification for that floor covering. And then there's one for wood flooring. And then so if you want to be a wood floor inspector, you have to start off going to installation school, then sand and finish school, and then you go to inspector school and do the same process. And every floor covering kind of has a silo that's very similar to that. And I've done that with most floor covering types. So I am certified across the board. And then if you want to, and then walkway auditing training is where we're going out to evaluate floors for traction. And so we go in and look at floors from the safety side of it. So And that's a totally different world, being a walkway auditor. And so I've been trained in a lot of the regulations and measuring coefficient of friction and traction levels on hard surfaces and evaluating floors and walkways for the floor safety element. And then I take that knowledge, and you could just be a walkway auditor, you could just be a floor inspector, but then I take those knowledge and then I work for attorneys in lawsuits. And so I do two different areas: personal injury, and I deal with construction defect law. So lawyers will call me and hire me to give consultation on cases involving either of those things, and I work all over the country doing that.
So for instance, let's say someone was at a new mall, which of course you're not going to really walk into a new mall pretty much, but let's say, and someone tripped and they said that there was maybe some kind of a grade in that particular flooring. That's something you would sort of come out and say, yeah, this is off because of X, Y, and Z, and give that expert witness along those lines.
Correct. And so for instance, part of it is trying to determine so everything's a standard in our world, right? I can't just, being a good witness or, expert witness or consultant, you just can go out there and say, hey, look at me, I'm smart, this is my opinion. And though they are opinions, we have to apply what industry standard, what OSHA standard, what government regulation would apply in that scenario. And then our opinions are, this is why this applies. And you have to have some kind of basis for what your opinion is. And then, but it's not just qualitative. I do a ton of quantitative analysis where I'm measuring coefficient of friction. Like you're talking about grading, we'll measure the grade. And, if there's something that someone trips over, we'll apply what the proper mat standard is. If it's a cleaning issue, you wouldn't believe that, like, for instance, how a floor is maintained will reduce its traction levels. And so I used to go to janitor conferences. That's how nerdy I get about this stuff, because we can prove and show that if a floor covering is not being maintained, a film will build up over time, and that film will reduce its traction. So even if the floor was installed at a high traction level, for instance, if it's not maintained properly over time, that high traction level will be reduced to a low traction state, or at least help someone slip more likely. And then, but we can go back and dig into things as nerdy as, how are the cleaning staff trained? What's the dilution of what's the concentration of your cleaning chemicals, and how are you managing that process? And then those are all things that we start looking at when it comes to this. So I can go out there. I have this very expensive instrument called a tribometer. It's like a $7,000 robot. And I'll go out there and measure the coefficient of friction on a hard surface, and then we'll clean the floor, strip the floor, and do the test again. And then whatever that delta is, that difference in coefficient of friction, is going to be because of the cleaning and the maintenance. And so if there's a big difference, then we start digging into all that other stuff I just mentioned, and then we can prove that there's negligence on how they're maintaining the floor, and then that definitely will contribute to a slip and fall.
Wow. That is ultra fascinating. And,
No, it's not.
Oh, no, it is. It is extremely fascinating. And I think the reason why it's really fascinating to me is because, first of all, I'm interested in all things. You know that. Like, I love reading all things. I love diving in. But the other thing is I've owned a store in a retail environment, and I was cognizant of cleaning the floors, how they were cleaned, and then also when we had the rugs that would sit on them, I would think about how much slippage they had from a liability standpoint, because I didn't want any of my customers coming in and having the mat, slippery and slipping and hurting themselves, first and foremost, and second of all, from the liability standpoint. And so what you just said actually makes perfect sense to me, because I've seen that in my own business at one point, is what is that probability of someone slipping? And gosh, I was thinking about that too, like, some of those commercial grade tiles that have sort of like that sandy sort of texture-ish feeling for grip.
Right.
That hits the nail on the head. If there's a lack of cleaning, that will create it'll almost like make some of those those sandy kind of particles sort of disappear, so that grip goes away.
Two things happen with that. So, for instance, they actually can wear down over time too. And then, yes, you're correct. So what happens is they can also be coated. So I've learned a lot from the lawsuits, but I don't just do that. I actually do pre-accident consulting. So I have a really big client in Wyoming, and I go on site for 2 days a year. And it's a mine, and they have all these shower rooms. Like they have like 60 or 80 locations throughout the facility. It's a big place. And I'll go out there every year, and I'm auditing their floors in the same rooms every year. And then I send them a report, and then we compare it to like previous readings in those spaces every year. And I'm giving them a report card every year, because their safety department's very, very proactive out there. So they're not having me come up there because they had an accident, though they have, so I'll go up intermittently if they do have an accident, because they want to know if there's something's changed, if someone did fall or did somebody do something silly. And because some people do cause their own problems, right? But it's the same thing. So I'll go out there and I'll say, hey, look, these, and my reports are pretty detailed. I'm I'm telling where the samples are taken, the floor covering, the condition, and hygiene of that floor covering at the time that I'm inspecting, and then we give advice. So, and I wish more companies did that, right?
Yep.
Because you would have, less problems. Because if you don't, they say this, the old MBA thing: if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So if you're not noticing a problem and not on top of that problem, you don't know that it's existing until someone gets hurt, and then people are reactive. And here's the thing: it's like, when you're healthy and young, slip and fall is not really a problem. But, if you're over age 65, if you're a woman over 65 and you break a hip, you're 5 times more likely to die within 12 months. And so there's some really very scary data and statistics out there about, the older you get, the slip and fall. There's a lot of things when you get older. For instance, your eyes don't work as well from the standpoint that you don't take in as much light as you grow older. And so you don't see differences in heights as easily as your senior citizens don't see those differences in elevation. So you have to mark like things that are, you have to make sure that things are properly marked between, steps and things like that, especially when both things are the same color. So if you're like on a concrete step and you go down to a concrete, parking lot or even inside, some people can't see that height transition. When you get older, you don't pick your feet up as high, typically. And so, if you're young, you don't think about it. But someone who, as you grow older, they might only pick up their feet typically about a quarter inch when they walk. And so what happens is if you have a height transition problem between two floor coverings at like a half inch, they're going to trip and fall on that. And there are standards for that for a reason. And that's where those standards come from, because as you age, your body mechanics and the ergonomics about how you're able to move your mobility have huge impacts on how those floor surfaces. So I don't like to normally, plug anything, but how you build a building's important. So you ever been in a Maverick gas station?
Oh, yeah.
And they're building like crazy out here, out west. The one thing I like about Maverick gas stations, they have no curbs from the parking lots. It's just a long, slow ramp up into the building. They have no steps going into their buildings. And then and they also do. This is how nerdy I am. This is the stuff I notice when I'm out in public. But they also just do polished concrete, and so there's no floor transitions inside of a Maverick. So they have this nice gentle slope going in with so it's just like it's totally what I call a handicap accessible, but I did think it's good. It's just good accessibility anyway. And then they have no flight or they have no height changes in transitions on floor covers in their buildings. So whatever architect designed their buildings took that into account. But guess what? If you don't have that curb, you're going to have less trips. You're just going to reduce your slip and fall problems or trip and fall problems because of that. So if you think about those things while you're building and designing your buildings, you'll reduce your impact. Here's another weird nerdy thing. I'll give you weird numbers. So for every, to remove a pound of soil during cleaning inside a building costs about $600 for every pound of soil that gets into the building. It takes $600 to move it out. But you can reduce almost 100% of soil from entering a building by having up to 30 feet of walk-off mats at the beginning of the entrances. So if you have about 30 feet of walk-off mat, you will have almost no moisture or soil coming into the building for people's shoes. But it takes about 30 feet. And so if you know that, and you design your buildings, you can also reduce your maintenance costs tremendously, as well as your slip and fall rate, because if you have the proper scraper and walk-off mats at the front entrance, you're not going to have the moisture problems coming into buildings either.
Wow. Okay, that is very interesting. So I would assume then maybe there's some age demographic study that could also go into it, depending on the kind of building, right? So like if you see that you've got an aging demographic, you're probably, or should be anyway, gearing your flooring more specifically to the age demographic because of the height of lifting up your feet and all those types of things.
So there's a whole world in architecture, and this is a little outside of my expertise, but I know a lot about it. It's called aging in place, right? It's building with all these things in mind. So another thing would be like older people, especially with arthritis, lever door handles are better for them than round door handles.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah.
But the problem is my dog can open the door when I have the lever handles. But here's the thing. I wouldn't even say you design the building because of older people or seniors. I'm saying is Maverick's not designing their buildings for old people. Right. And in fact, I just call that good design because it helps everybody. You have a nice ramp scenario like that. It's easier for people in a wheelchair
or people with disabilities. You just have a bad back that day.
Yeah, and so it's actually just good accessibility design. I think, for instance, and so I think a lot about architecture. So I think staircases should all be 5 feet wide, about 60 inches wide. And why that is if you have to have stairs and you can have somebody walk next to somebody going down or up the stairs. So if you have a wider staircase and you have someone, you can help them down the stairs. And just if you think about it, but it's really interesting when you get into a house, and most people don't understand what good design does because you might not know why it's good design. You just like the vibe. You ever been in a place and you're like, I just like the vibe of this place? A lot of times it's because of the architecture and how it's designed. So there's a building you and I were at an event the other day, and that building has interesting design. There's no steps going into that building other than on the concrete, but there's ramps everywhere. But there's not height transitions going in and out of that building. And you don't really think about it, but you're like, hey, this building just has a good design. And there's no floor surface changes in there. And those all make a big difference on how they work, even for people that don't need that. It's just good design. So if you have people that think about the aging in place technologies and techniques and accessibility guidelines, if you've ever been into a house that has a 5 or 6 foot wide staircase, you just like that staircase better. If you go down to a house that has a really narrow staircase, it just makes you feel, ew, I just don't like this staircase. Well, that's all design. And so when you understand that good design also translates into safety or into safer buildings or buildings that seniors can stay in longer and more independently. When I look at houses that have like stairs on the porch, steep stairs going up or something like that, I don't even like those houses because I know that as I grow older, I won't be able to live there forever. And so I like the design of houses that are designed. And even though, you go out, there's a lot of new subdivisions out there trying to go for this older look where they have a big porch and they have all these stairs getting up. And I'm like, the problem with that is older people or people with disabilities are kind of locked out of that kind of design. And even though it looks nice, it's impractical. And if you go into like senior developments, like the 55 and older developments, they're very different in how they're designed. They're almost always single level living. They have almost no stairs. They have wider doorways. In the internal doorways are all minimum 36 inches. That's for wheelchair accessibility. But those are actually nice designs. It's like those are houses I want to live in. And so it's just whether people put this thoughtfulness into the designs. And a lot of times it starts with the architects.
Wow. I mean, that would also fall in line with ingress and egress for fire escape.
All of it.
Yeah, that's, gosh. I'm actually really fascinated, man. I'm very thoroughly enjoying this conversation. But as we move to pivot into the project that you're also currently working on alongside of Flooristics, I honestly feel like I could talk to you about floors, as funny as this sounds, for hours. I really could.
My wife would be happy that you would talk to me because she doesn't want to hear it. I make it miserable because and it used to be a lot worse. I normally don't say anything now, but when I go into, restaurants and stuff and I'm like, that's a trip hazard. That's a fall hazard. Look at that was not installed properly. It's like my in-laws. It's really funny. They've been building a bunch of houses every 2 years. They build a new house and they flip it. And they don't ever ask me my opinion. It's funny because they never ask my opinion about floors ever, which is really bizarre, but they don't. And I'm like, I don't say anything to them. I go in their houses and their floors are all jacked up, but they don't know it or don't care about it. So I'm like, I'm not going to bring it to their attention, right? It's just because that's just, I don't want to get into that. But it's like, that's the downside, right? When you know something, you know how it is in your expertise and stuff. You hear someone tells you, hey, I got this bad insurance deal or whatever. I think I got a great deal. And you're like, oh no, dude, you're paying way too much. But you don't want to say anything necessarily because you don't want to be rude. But it's like, I'm always like, every time I go somewhere, I'm looking at the floors and I'm just like, oh, that's bad. But I'm not going to say anything.
Well, and I think that people that are watching this video that own brick and mortar spaces are going to now feel more educated and also at least be on a more of a heightened state of alert on what their flooring looks like. Because, again, being that I had a brick and mortar at one point, same thing. If I'm at a concert or something and there's not proper taping over cords, I'm like, oh, this is a liability. And I will actually search someone out and be like, hey, there needs to be some safety tape on this. Someone's going to trip. Or if there's some kind of a goofy thing with the transition. In fact, I almost said the name. There's a restaurant. It's a longtime restaurant, wonderful place, and it's a Utah staple. For a little while, they were doing construction right on the inside of their first door in. And there was a transition that was easily 2.5 inches.
That's bad.
That's catastrophic for all the above, no less the elderly, the wheelchair. I mean, so from an ADA standpoint, it probably didn't even meet the metrics. And I talked to him about that. I said, this flooring transition is a problem, and you're going to have a big problem unless you get this squared away with like a little mini ramp or something, 2 inches. Anyway, we could go into that forever, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing: if anybody is a retailer or someone that has a retail facility, just understand this: you're, as an owner of a building, you're responsible for the safety of the people you invite into your facility, and you're responsible for that. And there are things that you are liable for. The big ones, making sure mats are safe. If a mat has a wrinkle in it, that mat needs to be thrown away. And you're liable for that. If someone trips over a mat because it's a little bit wrinkled, that's on you. You're responsible for that. Understand that if you don't clean your floors right, they're not going to be as safe as ones that are properly cleaned. And so you got to make sure that you at least think about that. And then if anybody, wants some help, they can always call me. But, but typically just be safe, be clean, keep your place, keep your facilities clean, but be aware you are responsible for the floor safety of your facility.
Exactly. So what got you interested in cryptocurrency all to begin with? What year was that approximately? What was the spark that drove you to this industry?
I first started hearing about crypto like 2012, 2011. And I'm just like, nope, I want nothing to do with that toxic nonsense. And I started hearing it originally through the libertarian circles that I was in. And that was the exact reason I didn't want anything to do with it. So understand when crypto, look where Bitcoin came out, 2008 timeframe. And when it came out, it was very fringy. But here's the problem is, one, we were broke at that point. That was in the middle of the housing crisis, or after the first housing crash, right? So my wife wasn't even working at the time, so I'm responsible. My business went down 90%, at least the construction side went down 90% in like 2 years. So we didn't have any money to gamble with. Let's start there. I didn't have gambling money back then. And the other thing that was weird is that most of the people that were pitching Bitcoin is a thing back when it was like $1 or something like that were literally people that were broke and living in their mom's basement. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm not living in my mom's basement, but I'm almost broke and I don't have gambling money and I'm not going to take financial advice from people that are even broker than me. And that's where, and so I just didn't think it was relevant, right? And so now here's the thing, based on the knowledge and information we had at the time, hindsight's always 20/20. You got to remember, before Bitcoin, there were multiple attempts at alternative currencies put out there several times. There was digital, there was the Liberty dollars and some other things. There was multiple attempts at people trying to create alternative currencies to US dollar. And so there was ones that were gold-backed, silver-backed, silver coins. People got sued, put in jail over some of those things. And so this wasn't the first iteration of a new kind of money. Understand that. And so I just thought it was just another one of those fringy gold, kind of scammy things. That's how I viewed it. And I don't think it was an unreasonable view of it.
Right.
And looking at the people that were into it at the time, they were mostly sketchy people too. And if you look at some of the early OG crypto people, they are fucking, excuse me, sorry, you have to beat that out. They're freaking sketchy. And some of those guys have been in jail, literally felons. And some of those are still doing podcasts about Bitcoin. So understand, I reasonably took that stuff with a grain of salt. I started investing in crypto. So I started in 2016, 2017, started going to some local meetups here in the Salt Lake area because I met some more people. And I'm like, okay, so let's just say that's like 2010 to like now 2015, 16. So 7 years had passed. Bitcoin got more popular. Bitcoin was, I don't know, worth a lot more at that point. And it started getting some traction, which none of those alternative previous iterations of those currencies didn't get traction. So I started talking to my wife, and we started investing in 2017. And then we actually made some money pretty quickly. And I said I had this hair idea, and I knew some developers and people that were also interested in crypto at that point. And I just said, hey, why don't we start our own project and see what we can make out of it. And so we did, and we started literally New Year's Day of 2018. We launched, and I don't know how technical the audience is, but we launched an Ethereum token. Yep. And we gave it away for free, no strings attached, so we didn't want to be any illegal security. Within about, that was at the height of that first big bull run for crypto. And then 6 months later, we were beginning of crypto winter, right? It all tanked in like that February. And then come around May or June, everybody that was on our project lost interest, including our developer. And they all bailed. So it was like, my wife was a co-founder, it was like 6 of us originally. And then, and everybody bailed, including our dev. And I'm like, and my wife's like, I guess we're done, right? Because like we don't really have anything else to do, and the market died, and we're just kind of sitting there, and this coin's not moving, and we're like, and I'm like, my wife and I had a lot of conversations, and I go, I would feel bad if we just quit. Because we didn't sell coins, but other people put them on the market and other people bought them. And I don't want to just abandon those people. I'd feel bad. Now we might call that a rug pull. Back then that term didn't exist. And she's like, we don't even have a team. And I think we need to build our own blockchain. And in that like first 6 months, we learned so much. I learned so much about crypto. I learned about the markets, and I understand what the problems were. And I also think I saw what opportunities there were. And so my wife and I had this like long conversation. I remember we were in the car, and I know exactly where we were driving when we had this conversation because it was a pretty heated conversation. And I said, if I can get a team, if I can pull some new team together, would you support it? She begrudgingly said yes. Well, I did. So we ended up we created our own blockchain, and then we basically we had everybody convert their tokens over to the new blockchain. We rebranded as TUSC, and kind of the new focus originally then, and this is about pivoting. I said earlier, entrepreneurs have to be able to pivot sometimes. And we had learned a lot, and I said, I think there's opportunities out there, but I think mass adoption is only going to happen if we focus on some industries that have a recognized problem with payments. And of all the industries in the United States that have a recognized problem with payments, even then and now, they're all distasteful to somebody, right? That would be things like pornography and gambling and payday lenders and cannabis and CBD and multi-level marketing. And all these industries have problems with payments. And one of the ones is also the gun industry. And so what we initially said is like, okay, if you want to get adoption, you got to start with one of those industries. And then you actually have to go out and talk to that industry and market and do business development. Even if you're a decentralized cryptocurrency project, you actually have to go talk to people. And at the time, and even now, most crypto projects only go to crypto conferences. And I think why that is that, a project has to be optimized for one of two things. And I view it differently than most other cryptos, but you're either optimized for investors, meaning you want people to buy it as an investment, or you're optimized for getting adoption, meaning you're optimized for customers. So to me, I see the crypto world as customers and investors. What crypto people, mostly people in crypto think that there's just everybody's a user, and they do it in a very generic way, and I just don't think that's true. And so our strategy has been a little different. We said, let's start with one of those industries. We looked at all the industries and we said, let's start with the gun industry. And then we chose the gun industry as the initial first market to just go talk to people because one, it's a $50 billion industry. Two, it's constitutionally protected. And I did have some experience and I had a little small side hustle business in that space. And I'm a gun guy. So, I kind of understand that culture very well. And so we spent the last couple of years doing business development in the firearms world. And we're starting to get some traction and some interest from that world now. And then last fall, the latest pivot is that we updated our blockchain and rebuilt it essentially to allow for asset and NFT creation on our blockchain. And now we're in the process of building the front ends to make it so it's easy for people to make and mint NFTs on our blockchain. And we have now multiple big companies and influencers in the gun world that are interested in start to mint NFTs. And actually we've found that NFTs are an interesting, easier onboarding for people than having people go right to accepting TUSC for payments because they view that as a bigger risk because of liquidity, but having them get interested in NFTs for marketing is actually easier for them. So we started focusing a little more on the NFT side of things, but it also gives us a pivot a little bit away from guns. So we're going to be doing like art NFTs and things like that. But the idea with focusing on one industry and then kind of working your way out, we were kind of modeling that on how Amazon started. Yeah. Those us gray-haired people start noticing. Or no-hair people, right? I got some gray now. But Amazon started with the bookstore intentionally, and they always had a plan to go into other markets and expand. There's a great video I've seen, an early interview with Bezos about that. And he said, no, we picked the book industry not because I liked books. They said it's because there's like 400,000 different SKUs around, or 400,000 topics. Yeah. And he said books hit every single industry. So it was like the best bang for the buck to disrupt the book industry and then work your way out. And he always had a plan. It wasn't like accidental. He knew exactly what he was doing intentionally. And so we just kind of said, that seems like a good model, and this is new technology. I look at crypto. I mean, what's crypto? It's just fintech software. Yeah. Right? I mean, that's all it is, ultimately. It doesn't matter if it's decentralized, it's just how it's managed, but it's still software, and it's still facilitating movement of value, which is payments. And so if you think about it, look at all the other fintech software out there, PayPal, Square, Stripe, Cash App. Every one of them does marketing. Yep. Every one of them runs commercials. Every one of them does ads. Every one of them does business development. But yet crypto projects think they're somehow immune from doing those activities. Yet it's really, they're just doing, they're just ignoring the business development and the marketing part because most crypto projects are optimized for investors. We've taken the other approach and said, let's optimize for customers and focus on getting people to use it for its intended purpose. And I understand why people focus on the investment side. One, it's easier. It's a whole lot easier to tell people they're going to get rich quick for not having to do anything but giving you some money. That's easy sell to people. Getting people to adopt a new technology for payments is really hard. And it's a lot more work. So in the beginning, we focused almost too much on that. We ignored the investors primarily because we didn't want to be seen as an illegal security or doing something sketch. But now that's actually kind of hindered us a little bit because we don't have any liquidity right now. We've been focused 100% on building these relationships. Now we have people that want to be our customers, but they're like, well, you need more liquidity. So it's like now we think that NFTs are going to be helping with that. We got some new marketing stuff that we're going to be rolling out pretty soon with a bunch of influencers. So I think we're poised now to make some really big leaps and strides this year. But that's kind of been the process and progress over the last 4 years.
Nice. So, I mean, that transition from being an ERC20 token on the Ethereum blockchain to building your own blockchain, I mean, that's got its own set of headaches. I mean, you have to pull in some really talented people. What did that process, if you could sort of give us a snapshot, what did that process look like for you?
Very difficult. Very difficult. One, since we're basically a volunteer charity project at this point, because we don't have any way to pay anybody. Since we didn't do an initial coin offering in the beginning, right, we didn't have any capital. We've been completely unfunded or underfunded from the time. My wife and I have been the main funders. Whenever there's had to be funding, my wife and I have been the funders for the project. And so trying to get people to be volunteers for a potential project that they'll take coins, but Very few people want to take coins from an illegal, a project that doesn't have any liquidity.
Yeah.
So essentially, being like a free and open source software project, getting work done is slower. It's inconsistent, and it's hard to get good developers to work on it because it becomes a hobby project. It's not anybody's priority. I'm the only one. It's my priority, but no one else's. But I think as we start growing and improving the liquidity over the next few months, I think that's going to be a lot easier. But I think the downside of being like right now in crypto, it's a lot easier to be a crypto token than it is to be a dedicated blockchain. Though I think the value of a dedicated blockchain long term is a lot greater than a token, because you can just spin up a token, and even just getting on things like exchanges or dexes. Like if you're a crypto token, it literally takes an exchange 5 minutes to add you. They just literally plug in your contract address into their system, and then you're in. When you're a dedicated chain, it takes actual developers to have to figure out how your chain's different from other chains with your similar code base. So it costs a lot more. They're less likely to work with you. So that's a little harder. And since now, and again, we started 4 years ago, so there's a lot of things that have changed since then. They didn't even have liquidity pools like Uniswap and PancakeSwap didn't even exist when we started. So right now, there really aren't a lot of those liquidity pools now for dedicated chains. There's one called XBTS, which we actually just got listed on, that is a cross-chain DEX with liquidity pools. But up until very recently, that didn't even happen. That didn't exist. So there's a lot of it's harder as a coin than it is a token, but we're also not an illegal security. So there's like these trade-offs. But I think ultimately, long term, if you look at the problem is it's really easy to get on exchanges indexes when you're a coin or a token. But I think long term, it is a lot easier, but I think the long-term value of those tokens is less. I think when you have a little more influence over the foundation of what you're building, you can have a lot more power on the kind of things and the kind of tools you can develop for potential customers and solutions you can build for customers. The benefit of working with a newer project like us is that we are smaller and we can make decisions better, even though, because being a decentralized project, decision making is voted on, so it's a lot more complicated. But we're still a smaller project, so we've been fairly bureaucracy free with our project up until now. So if we need to add some feature at the protocol level that someone really, really wanted it, we could fork pretty easily. If we had the development resources to do it, we can bureaucratically do it very efficiently. Whereas if you wanted to add something to Ethereum or even Solana at the protocol level, it's next to impossible and takes a long, long time to make those changes now.
Yeah, definitely. So, I often say that CryptoKitties of the 2017 run on Ethereum were sort of the NFT 1.0. And we've, and I might be wrong in saying that, but that's my take anyway.
I agree.
Okay. So, and of course, the concept of NFTs has gotten really sexy over this last year and a half or so. Obviously, as with all kinds of technologies, especially in the crypto space, you're going to see a lot of excitement in the beginning and almost creation of a bubble, and then it bursts, and then it sort of works itself out, and then you sort of see where the ashes fall and what is still standing. I personally believe that NFTs definitely have extreme longevity in the system. It's just a matter of getting normal people to I don't want to say normal people, but let's say novices, people coming into the space to understand, like, what the heck is an NFT? How does this affect my life? And I see it sort of affecting music. I see it affecting high-end clothing brands. I see it really coming into areas that don't exist quite yet. But I wanted to sort of get your take on what does the future of NFTs look like in your worldview?
So I think the long-term value of NFT technology is actually not art. I don't think that's going to be the big technological paradigm shift of it. I think it's what's driving the hype, the hype right now. I think it's the tokenization and fractionalization of physical assets, which are going to be the long-term big play, because I think there's going to be trillions of dollars of physical assets that can be tokenized and sold as NFTs. I also think that the future of NFTs will be involved with micro startups, though the laws don't support that yet. Those would be technically illegal security offerings now, and maybe it's not going to happen in the United States, but that will happen, where eventually you might be able to get, a local, let's say you want to start a barbershop. Now, you don't have to worry about barbershops, but other people have to go to the barbershop. I'm just kidding. But I just shave my hair with my own clippers anyway, so I don't care either. But say, for instance, someone wanted to set up a local barbershop. You could literally sell NFTs that represent fractional shares in that barbershop, and having that NFT might give you invested in this startup local barbershop, and maybe you get free haircuts for life, depending on how much money you donated to that. That's what an NFT does. NFTs are just digital. It's a way which we've never had before, the way to prove it's provable digital ownership of something.
Yes.
And that's what's interesting about it. Art and digital assets, digital files like music and art and video, that's the no-brainer because those are easy. Because there's nothing regulated about that, right? So that's why those have taken the market by storm, because there's been a lot of problems with digital rights management and copyright and royalties for creators and things like that. The laws are screwed up in the United States, and I think I'm not bullish on the U.S. government, how it wants to regulate crypto, because our U.S. government's kind of corrupt, and they do everything to protect corporations from disruption rather than support disruptive technology. So I think a lot of the long-term innovation technology for crypto is going to happen outside the United States, and I'm saddened by that, but I just don't have any faith in our government being able to manage things correctly and well and see the big picture. And they have a lot of conflicts of interest and moral hazards they got to work through. And so I just think a lot of this technology will allow for this stuff in the future. I just don't think a lot of it's going to happen in the United States. Short term, what we're looking at, so like right now, there's lots of different NFT capable blockchains. They're a lot bigger than us. What we're doing a little different is, one, we're focused on bringing people that aren't in crypto, businesses and people and influencers that are not in crypto at all, to crypto. So one, with our project, we're not trying to cannibalize investors from other projects to come over to TUSC. That's not what we've been doing. We've been saying, hey, you people that are over here in this other industry, you're not in crypto at all. Here's how we not only understand crypto, but we also understand your industry, because we've been there for a while. And so we got several people that want to do interesting novel uses with NFTs. So we have one group that wants to do historic documents as NFTs on our blockchain. No one else is kind of doing that. And so we're going to be working with them, and it's going to be really kind of cool what they want to do. I can't give all the ins and outs because it's a cool product idea. And so one of the things that I do as a crypto co-founder, I view myself as an ambassador, but I'm also an entrepreneur and a problem solver. So it's like I understand the technology, but I'm not a developer. I'm not a programmer, but I understand the tech well enough. But then I put my little brain around, hey, I understand this industry. This technology could be used here, which would be really interesting. And hey, no one's really doing this anywhere else. And so I think we have some interesting things. I have a great idea that I want to do as a startup layer 2 on TUSC that would involve NFTs for, all I would say that it could be used for kind of a weird hybrid application around cross-border payments and things like that. So we got some interesting things we want to do using NFTs for that kind of application that are, again, novel. No one else is doing this. And then we have in the gun world, the Boy Scout world, the veteran world, patches are a big part of the culture. And challenge coins are a big part of the culture. Yeah. So we have like this. So right now we are the only crypto project I know that has patches.
Oh, nice.
And so, but the gun world in general, patches are a big deal. Like exactly, and then challenge
coin that a dear friend of mine that was in the military died by suicide just in 2020. So
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
But challenge coins, and this is a challenge coin too, and someone who's a vet understands it's upside down. But so gun companies, so if someone who doesn't know what a challenge coin is, generally challenge coins are given as either a thank you or a commemoration of something. Mm-hmm. And if someone, even if you don't get it, if someone gives you a challenge coin, treat it as an honor because it is one. And so to me, patches and challenge coins should be NFTs.
Oh, that's fascinating concept.
Yep. And so right now we have a lot of big players in the gun space and influencers that are waiting to launch their digital patches on the TUSC blockchain, which will be digital. And we got some ideas for challenge coins. So some of the influencers want to, and I'm talking to the marketing departments of several large manufacturers, and they're very interested in this. And no one else is doing that either. But it's a unique factor of the gun world and the veteran world, and even think merit badges, right? Merit badges could easily be NFTs. And in fact, I think the Boy Scouts of America, make a note, I need to call them, should probably be issuing a digital NFT of all their merit badges, as well as they could still give a patch out, but they could also give the NFT that verifies that you are entitled to that patch.
That's actually really cool. So I'm an Eagle Scout myself, and that would be very interesting to be able to hold a literal digital copy of
your Eagle Scout badge.
My Eagle Scout on a MetaMask wallet or something.
I only made it to life, but I get it. But here's the thing. So that's where the gun culture came. So if you think about it, that's where gun culture came from, was from the military and the Boy Scouts.
Right.
But right now, I don't have it real handy. But when you go to SHOT Show, for instance, I just went to which is a big gun trade show. I went in January, and dude, I got a whole box of patches because every manufacturer makes patches. And this has gotten so crazy that the influencers of these gun companies trade them now. And literally they have these display boards, like sandwich boards, that they put out at their trade show booths with their patches that they've gotten or given out. So that's the first thing we're working on right now, is to make it as soon as we can. And we're hopefully going to have something here in the next few weeks so people could start minting. And if we can do NFT creation right now through a command line interface, we just don't have a GUI for it in our wallet. And we're working on that literally right now. And so we have influencers that are in the gun space that want to start issuing their own NFTs patches. So we already have customers that are waiting for this, and it's going to be a great when we can start doing this. So this is like a weird thing for okay, so I don't know any other crypto. There's, no one from Solana or Ethereum going to SHOT Show, and because they're not coming from that industry at all, they don't even know this is a great application of NFT technology. Yeah. And so that's where we're starting. So even though we're newer to the NFT space as a platform, I'm just identifying actually unique opportunities to leverage the technology for real world cases and uses. But not only that, and when I hate the word use case, because a use case means you could potentially do something with it. I'm talking about, we have people that want to do it, and there's a big difference. Like, we have customers waiting to build these NFTs. And so that's what we're going to do, and that's how we're going to grow. I'm not trying to cannibalize people from other blockchains, and I'm not saying, hey, come invest in TUSC. That's not our focus. I'm focused on, look, we have this tool. We as a team, we understand what the problems with your industry, and we think that our tool can help solve some of those problems, and this is how we're going to help you. And that's what we do, and that's what makes us, I think, different than most other crypto projects. But I would say in a year, I think we're going to be in a good place, because we just got a lot of fun stuff that we're working on right now, and we finally have people that want to be your customer. And last year at this time, we didn't have customers. We didn't have people waiting for us. Now we do. And so now I'm pretty excited that we're going to scale.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when it comes to technology anyway, I mean, technology moves this fast, human adoption moves this fast. Right. And especially when you look at the adoption curve, you've got your innovators and you've got your early adopters and your early majority and late majority, et cetera. I'd say that in the NFT moment right now, we're still in the innovator period. The catch is, of course, whenever you've got like these big giant bubbles of sort of goofy things, because, obviously like buying a piece of artwork as an NFT for $500,000 or something it's not really a sustainable process at this snapshot in time. But once that sort of dies out and you can see, to use the terminology, potential use cases and other aspects, I think it's really important for people to not disregard the NFT space as a goofy artwork, the Bored Ape thing or whatever, and all these kinds of things, to take a look at what comes after what comes next. So not what's going on now, and not even what comes in part two, but trying to read the future of this thing, because I really do seeing it as a major disruptor for some major industries. And I think there's a lot of infrastructure currently being built on the back end at this point. So I love that you're going after completely new segments of things that, the Ethereum people and the Solana and all, they're not even really messing with.
Right.
And I mean, yeah, so it's interesting stuff.
Well, I always look at it like, and a lot of, and it's funny because you know this. I mean, crypto projects are extraordinarily tribal, and some of them are almost cultish and cult like. I don't view other crypto projects as our competitors, right? I just don't see them as competitors. One, I on the payment side, I would see I see Visa and Mastercard as the competitors. I don't see Bitcoin or Dash or Ethereum as the competitor on the payment side. On the NFT side, same deal, right? They're most of the Ethereum blockchain and Solana. They're focused on just cartoon art, digital art, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they're not even really focusing on fine art yet. I mean, the fine art world hasn't even come to NFTs yet, and I do fine art as hobbies, both in welding and photography, and I see a lot of opportunity in the fine art world, and I want to start working with fine artists. I'd love to have fine art put on TUSC too eventually, just because I like that space. But to me, I think cartoon art is the hype. That's what gets people talking about it because of these crazy, get rich quick kind of scenarios. But I think that the underlying technology is amazing and has a lot of things, but a lot of use cases, a lot of potential. But you still have to have projects that are going out to do the work to sort out what those unique opportunities, whether it's like, gun patches or merit badges and things like that as NFTs, historic documents, these weird things that no one even thought about because they're not in the space, because they haven't left the crypto bubble. And that's part of the problem with I see a lot of other crypto products. They're in the crypto bubble. And on the other hand, we've always been kind of like out in the cold. I've never been in the crypto bubble, right? We've always been this kind of small marginalized altcoin project because we've never focused on the thing that everybody in the crypto bubble focuses on, which is the investment hype. And we've never focused on that. I've always felt it was a distraction to what I wanted to accomplish with the project. And now I do think it's necessary, and we are going to be improving liquidity and talking about that and doing, making sure that we have more ways and abilities for people to be able to get the coins and things like that. But it's just not been a priority. It's not been a get rich quick scheme for us. And to me, it's about really trying to solve real world problems with the technology. And to me, I've always said if we do that well, that the money will come, right? It's like that's just how things work. So we've been focusing on trying to deliver real value, not being a scam, not being, focusing on hype and things like that. There's billion-dollar blockchains out there that have no customers and no revenue and nobody doing anything on them. I don't want to be one of those. In fact, that would be easier to do. But I think it's a lot harder to get people to really use your blockchain and to really trust it and build things that are meaningful. And to me, I want to create that value with this technology. And yeah, it's a longer, harder way to go, but I feel better sleeping at night that I never took anybody's money and I never scammed anybody. And I like feeling that way, that like I feel good about what we've done in 4 years. I wish it would go a little faster. I wish we had more funding to build some of this stuff out, but we're working on those issues. And so I just sleep better at night doing it this way. That it doesn't always look like that on paper, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I applaud you definitely in doing things the right way because, and you see the wrong way done in the crypto space quite a bit. And I won't say that every single time it's done wrong, that it's being done nefariously. But there's a lot of people that might not understand securities laws, and they might not understand like some of these other aspects where they get themselves in trouble accidentally, not even trying to be a nefarious character. But there are nefarious characters as well. I think what I would say is I'd admonish anybody that's getting into this space to ask less questions about where the price of a project is going to go, whether it be Bitcoin or TUSC or Ethereum and so forth, and ask more, why does this exist all to begin with? And what problems is this trying to fix in the marketplace? Because if you understand the why, first of all, you know this better than anybody. If you understand the why of these things, you're going to have a better stick ratio in this ecosystem. You're not going to get in trying to make a quick buck, and then when you get your throat slit, which is going to be almost guaranteed if you're not careful, in terms of losing money, and then you fall out of the space. You're going to bring more users into the space if they're here to build and here to educate. That's why anybody that comes to me wanting to learn about Bitcoin, I say, let's not talk about price right now. Let's talk about the why first. Why does this space even exist? Why do NFTs even exist, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a good approach. It comes down to, are you looking for value? And are people creating that value? And I think a lot of crypto projects were run by developers, and engineers have this common issue with build it and they will come. That's very common.
Right.
And some of them really wanted to build good technology, and they just got lucky because they were the first, or they were early, and then people started buying it because they liked the technology. And if you look at a lot of the OG blockchains, they absolutely are illegal securities, but they got so big that they're almost too big to fail, and the government's not messing with them. And so, I mean, you see that a lot, right? But if you look at, there's still billion-dollar market cap crypto projects that have zero building being built on them. They have zero customers, and they're not really solving any problem in the real world. And so I think that's part of the thing that I'm disappointed in. And I'm not going to pick on any one particular project. I mean, this is a pretty rampant problem, to be honest. And so people are looking to get rich quick from not doing anything. And so it's like, I would almost feel guilty from getting rich quick that way, because I haven't created value. I don't deserve to be a billionaire if I haven't solved a lot of people's problems.
Agreed.
Now, I don't have any issue being a billionaire if I did solve a lot of people's problems. Like, there's a different animal. I'm not anti-billionaire. But I think there's a lot of people in crypto that have become billionaires or worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and they've really added no value, and they haven't solved any problems in the world. And that's what bothers me.
Goes to parts of the startup space, too. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Unfortunately, in a lot of, I think there's a lot of that. But I don't want that to be my life. That's not my path. To me, I want nothing more than to be successful in life. I'm an ambitious guy. I'm still hungry at my age. But I still try to figure out how I can do good things with the projects that I work on. Even my day job, sometimes people that have been injured. I sound like a lawyer. I sound like a lawyer commercial now, but where people legitimately have been hurt because someone else screwed up, or in the case of preventing injuries. I mean, I didn't get into it, but my dad died from the complications from a slip and fall, which is why I kind of got into the safety side. So I learned a lot about it because of that. And so I don't want to see other people have to suffer because of things that are preventable. But I think that same thing with crypto. I want to create value. I don't deserve to be rich yet because I haven't, from this project, because we haven't solved anybody's problems yet. And so I'm excited that I think we're going to soon, and we're going to start scaling, and I'm excited, and I'd be happy to be rewarded if we are successful with that. But that's not the driving force. I could have made more money with this project in the first 6 months than I probably have because of how much money I put into it over the years.
Right.
If we would have walked away and rugged on the community during crypto winter, which most projects that launched during the time did do.
Unfortunately, you're right.
And we didn't do that. We could have. I'll be straight up honest. I could have walked with the 6 digits in my pocket, and we had the liquidity to exercise that within 6 months and walk away. And I know other people that did. Yep. And I didn't. I actually doubled down, and I actually put more money into the project to grow it and build it into something when I could have walked away and rugged and made 100 grand or whatever it was. But, and I just don't, I mean, that would have been okay. Right. I mean, I could use 100 grand, 4 years ago. Right. But I wouldn't have slept well doing that.
Nope.
I wouldn't have liked that. That's just not my personality.
I agree. Yeah. And I, like I said, I commend you for that, but you're that person. And that's why I surround myself with people like you, because you're doing things the right way, regardless of whether it's in the flooring business or your personal life or the crypto space. I think that doing things the right way, even if it's the tougher way, is always the right way, period.
Well, I appreciate that. And I wish more people in crypto felt that way, though. Unfortunately, most people say, what's your market cap? What's your volume? How much can I buy it for now? And how much can I sell it for in a week? I mean, that's what most people coming into crypto, that's what they care about, unfortunately.
Right.
And if that's all they care about, unfortunately, we're not attractive to people that think that way. And that's why we don't get a lot of traction in the crypto space, because that's not what we've been focusing on, because that's optimizing for investors, and we're not optimized for investors. We're optimized for trying to solve problems.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, this has been absolutely fascinating. And as we usually do on our phone calls, we could easily go for a few hours. But is
Sure.
there anything that I may have left off that is really important that we touch on before we move to a close?
No, I would just say, I guess it does. No, I could say a lot of different closing things. I would say if you're interested in crypto and you're interested in a project that's, looking at trying to solve real problems and having, unique things that we're working on, take a look at what we're doing. Got any flooring problems? Let me know. If you have any flooring questions, I answer questions all the time for people for free. If they say, "Hey, what about this?" Call me. I'll just tell you what I think. But I mean, go forward in life, even though there's tough times coming ahead for I think everybody around this world. Be optimistic, try to build, keep building. Don't get distracted by the craziness and the FUD out there and the inflation, all these things. Just try to focus on delivering value. And I think, especially with the turbulent times that we have with the economy and the geopolitical stuff, try to focus hard on building. And because if you don't get distracted, I think you're going to be rewarded for doing that. So just keep building, keep being optimistic, and keep moving forward. Don't get mired and stressed out by the stuff you have no control over. And I think that would be my best closing advice that I can give anybody right now.
Dude, that was a slam dunk for closing advice. I love that completely. I appreciate that sincerely as well. So my final question, and I forgot to give you a prep on this. It's pretty simple, but it's also hard at the same time. What is one of your favorite songs or favorite quotes or both?
I would say quote Glenn Phillips. He used to be the lead singer for Toad the Wet Sprocket. And he said, and I remember this, he said, people are basically good, but usually broken. And that resonated with me.
Wow.
I don't know why I remember that all of a sudden on top of my head, but that was a quote that I liked. And then, man, there's so many really great songs out there that I like, but most people don't know any of them. Depending on what phase of my life, I've gone through a lot of different phases. I think Just Like Heaven by The Cure is probably a song that I've never gotten bored of. So that would have been my freshman year of high school when that came out. So I like The Cure. And by the way, The Cure is one of the best concerts I'd ever seen. They're really good live. So I'd say that's old school, Rob. I really like that. I think Violent Femmes would have been, there's a couple songs by Violent Femmes that I really like too.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, that's always definitely insightful when I learn about people's favorite songs and quotes and so forth. So I appreciate you sharing those with us. So yeah, I again appreciate you being on the show. This has been absolutely a pleasure, and we've been able to learn all kinds of really cool things. And I know my viewers are going to get a ton of value out of it. But yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate you being on the show today.
Well, Jason, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. About
Absolutely.
time.
I know, man. I apologize, man. It's just been like so crazy, and I can't believe it's. But you were number 62 most followed on Twitter at one point, and you're number 62 on the podcast. So it actually sort of fitting.
That's weird, but yeah.
It's actually very weird. So if you don't mind hanging tight just a couple of moments while I wrap up the show, and then I'll talk to you for a couple of moments after. Is that cool?
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, man. So there you have it, Rob McNealy, episode number 62. Check out Flooristics. Go to their website. They've got obviously an extremely wide array of education and knowledge behind this. If you're building a building and you've got questions on a preemptive measure, definitely check with him, because there might be some things that you're able to avert in the future for safety concerns. So anyway, please subscribe to the channel. Throw us a thumbs up on the video if you enjoyed it, which I know you did. But anyway, thank you so much, and much love to you this week. And we're going to go ahead and rock the outro. Peace out.